Okay, what we'll do is we'll get started with day two. Morning, Temi, morning, Benicia. Lovely to have everyone back with us for day two of the summer boot camp. So today we're building on yesterday's sessions as well. Oh, you're just also polite. Everyone's saying good morning in the chat box. This is what it should feel like. If we were all together in our workshop, this is what it'd be like. But I love the fact that we can still do this over Zoom. So it's lovely to have you all back with us today. So building on from yesterday's session on business finances, today we're going to look at some extra aspects which are designed to help for those of you who are going to take part in the big pitch, and give you some extra information that you'll be able to take into writing the business plan and the different sections that will be submitted during the summer. So hopefully you were all okay with the format that we had yesterday. So again, we've tried to incorporate that today. We don't want to go longer than an hour without having a break. They'll probably be slightly shorter. Again, we allowed a certain amount of time for our presentations, followed by our breakout sessions or our exercises. So again, we're going to have regular breaks. We're going to have an hour for lunch at 12:30. And hopefully we'll wrap up at about 3:30 today. So just a quick recap to refresh your memories about what we covered yesterday. Obviously, we looked at personal budgeting and understanding what you need in terms of surviving as a bare minimum. We obviously have got the sections we looked at on profit and loss and on cash flow, looking at what that means for a very functional basis of your business. And then Christian looked at how you can look to the future, so you can look at past performance to determine what the future could look like. And I think he was very clear. He called it kind of almost a what did you say, Christian? Some kind of guess, informed guess.
Yeah.
So sometimes that is exactly what it is like when you're running your business. You have to make a series of informed guesses. And it's not to say they're always right. It's not to say they're always wrong. It's just kind of part of the process of starting a business. And I don't want to terrify you when I show you this next PowerPoint slide. But this is what running a business can feel like. Everything's happening around you. But as long as you have the ability to stay calm, look beyond it, and understand what you need to do to sort of get through either difficult times or understand how you keep sort of good times going. I'm not sure this is a good time. But if you can look at this and take this as a metaphor and think, you know what, if I can say, despite everything else, I can keep my head, I can be cool, calm, collected, I can look at things rationally, that's the process that you need to bring into running a business. You just need to sometimes take that step back, have that objective view, and just go, everything's fine. What do I need to go back to? Is it my finances to tell me what I'm doing? Is it the data? Is it the market research? Use what you do to help you through the difficult times. Use what you do to build on the good times. All right, so always keep that mentality. So just to refresh, obviously we covered the finances yesterday, and today we'll cover products and services and marketing and communications. Then over the summer, for those of you who'd like to take part, we're going to begin, I think we said, on the 29th of June with the first section. We'll cover that in this afternoon's presentation on the business plan submissions, with the opportunity to take part in a pitching practice session, and then actually pitch your business idea to a panel in October. We did that last year, and I think all in all we gave probably close to £3,500–4,000 worth away in terms of small grants to help people get started. So that's very much something we're hoping to be able to recreate this October. Okay, so we're going to move into the first main presentation of this morning. So I'm going to talk to you for about 20 minutes on how you design a business that stays relevant. Now, I'm sure we can all kind of relate to what you see on the screen in front of you. Um, but I think the key thing is, when I found this on Google, what I like is the fact that it calls it the basic design process, because the design process can be as simple or as complicated as you choose to make it. And ultimately, you go through a series of steps and you come to an end point. But when you're developing your business ideas, one of the things I spoke about yesterday was what's changed in the current times. And the way I like to highlight this is, if you look at a graph of change versus time, as you would expect, you always have that upward trajectory. There is always change, and it always happens. When you look back, you can see what's happened before, but we never really kind of can see what's coming next, because we've always got sort of different factors which are impacting what's happening around us. And for those of you who may be familiar with the term, we've got the pestle analysis typically, but these are the things that typically influence change around us on a daily basis. So whether or not it's the change in politics, which we're seeing, the current protests, we've got the Black Lives Matters movement trying to inform political change. We've got the economical circumstances and the societal ones at the moment, very much around what we've experienced through coronavirus. We've got technological changes. We're seeing new apps being developed, new technologies, the legal frameworks, which all of these sit in, are changing. And ultimately, from when we first did our session back in October, which was about idea creation, we looked at things like the UN sustainability goals and how they tie into environmental impacts. But those sustainability goals, literally, they span the spectrum of all of those 6 categories that I've just mentioned. So with change happening over time, the point I want to come back to is, how does your business stay relevant? If all of these 6 factors on the right-hand side, how are you changing with them? So what I think we tend to sort of do is, we're not actually on that same trajectory. So if you think of change and time happening, they happen at a constant. But as a business, we typically tend to sit just behind what's really happening. And the reason we do this is because we don't necessarily see the change and the opportunities. So we always sit just a little bit behind where we could actually be in current times. And then we've got this third line. And the way I'm going to kind of define this is quite harsh, but this is typically the businesses that are likely to fail. They're too slow to change, and they don't spend enough time looking at what they need to do. When you get to the businesses that succeed, they tend to operate at a pace that is close to normal, but still not quite where that red line is. And the top line is the high growth businesses. And the best way I can explain this at the moment are people like Elon Musk, someone who is looking at what we could do in terms of space exploration. People like Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic. These are the people who aren't looking at what's happening and staying still. They're the ones who are moving forward as best they can. And the reason this is all relevant is because when we try to use the past to inform the future, what happens is we find ourselves at a certain point in time. We then try and look backwards to see what's been before we move forwards. And that process is quite slow and quite time consuming, because it doesn't actually move us to where we are going as a society. It basically is a very small improvement, or you may be familiar with the term continuous improvement. You don't make huge drastic changes, but you always look to what's been, to what could be. And sometimes that can kind of inhibit the way that we design our businesses, and we kind of design them in a safe way where we might sort of achieve what we need to, but we don't necessarily achieve what we want to. So how we need to be and how we need to start thinking, and this is where we kind of should start to think about what we do as a business, is we need to think about how we want to be and how do we do that. Now, there are techniques that you can do, and we will we've got an ideas creation series of videos that Christian's currently editing. When they're ready, we'll circulate those to everyone so you can see how this applies. But if you imagine where the red line is, it's a certain amount of time, certain amount of change, and this black dot represents you starting a business. Now, what happens is that things can carry on as normal. So you've got those kind of dotted lines. But when you start to think about how you want your business to be and where you want it to be, how you want it to grow, what you want it to look like, you need to take that step. You need to ignore those dotted lines and you need to move beyond where you could be going and just go straight to where you want to be. So this could be in terms of business innovation. It could be about how you deliver something. As I sort of said, you want to try and think about not just, oh, if this is a constant change, I'm just going to continue to go with it. What you want to see is, well, if all of these things are happening, how do I move up faster, further, and quicker than my competitors? And that can be in many aspects. It doesn't just have to be in terms of your products or your services that you offer as a business. It might be how you decide to do your marketing. It might be the processes that you bring into your business that help you get there. Because what you're trying to do is leapfrog the time it would take normally to get your business to a certain point of growth or a certain point of delivery, and then continue with the change that would happen. Because that second red line that appears at the top, that's the new trajectory. That's what you've created for yourself. You've taken a chance to actually do things differently, and that's where businesses who succeed operate. Okay, so it's having that constant need and constant understanding that you need to be different. You need to make changes. Otherwise, for lack of a better word, you become irrelevant to your market, to your customers. You start to fall behind. So how do you make those changes? It's about looking where you want to go and what you want your business to look like. And I'm not going to go over this next slide again in all the detail, but I covered this yesterday. When we think about what we've experienced in the current times, there are going to be huge changes across the business world, whether or not it's kind of healthcare, whether or not it's going to be apps, new technologies. What we're seeing when you look back at the kind of that graph I just showed you is the disruption that we've experienced in society. And now people are looking beyond. They're not looking at what has been, because that's not going to inform future high growth business. What they're looking at is what could be and what will be, and that's where they're moving to. And that's where your mentality needs to be in terms of challenging your business expectations and how you want your particular business to grow. Sorry, All right, so when it comes to product and service design, there are 7 factors that you need to consider, and your business sits at the heart of all of these, and I'm going to go through them very quickly. Sorry, I'm having a bit of an issue with Zoom. So these are the factors that you need to consider when it comes to your product and service design. All right, and you may need to focus on one more than the other at any given moment within kind of the process of running your business. But this is where kind of you need to think, okay, what are all the different factors? And they will overlap with other areas as well. So you'll see that some of it might be linked to your financial forecasting. Some of it might be linked to your marketing and your advertising. But the purpose of product and service design from a basic fundamental approach is to break it down into the basics, into kind of the bare mechanics of what it means to run your business, and then to build on those, to improve those, and really to ensure that you're offering something of value. So the first 2 that we'll cover are place and price. So you're thinking about starting a business now, or maybe you're currently running one. You need to understand where in the world you sell your product or your service. And when I say that, I appreciate yesterday there's also the comment about maybe being a social enterprise. This is still absolutely relevant. So where do you sit in the world in terms of where you offer what you do. So if you're a shop, are you kind of a retail based? Do you wholesale? Do you work internationally? Are you just going to be online? Understanding the entry point of your business is the most critical thing, because that's where you have to build from. And once you do that, you obviously have to think about how you price yourself competitively. And this again ties into things like market research. How are you going to enter the market? So when you think about market penetration, the easiest way is to kind of think about, how do I start a business, enter a market, and start getting customers? For some businesses, you have to be what's called a loss leader. And typically you see these in tech companies, but as you saw yesterday in the example we worked on yesterday afternoon with the coffee shop, a loss leader is a business that needs to make a loss for a certain period of time. You have to accept that there may be high costs associated with starting a tech business. One example is that what we call kind of clean tech, which is linked to environmental businesses, so maybe low carbon, zero waste initiatives, things like this. For some businesses in that area, it can actually take 7 years of research to get to a point where it starts to break even. So think about what your business looks like. I'm not saying it will be a loss leader, but there will be months where maybe you don't make as much money as you need to. So you need to think about that. So then you've got cost plus. So literally, if you are working full time and you're starting a business, depending on what that is, you might be looking just to cover the minimum costs that you need to cover running that business. So if you were making, if you're doing something that was kind of maybe arts or crafts, you might just look to cover the cost of the materials, but not necessarily your time at that point, because what you're trying to do is build up a consumer base. And then over time, you would increase your prices to reflect the growth of your business, to then pay you for your time. And then you would start to create a revenue stream after that. And you go for a freemium premium model. So one of our graduates, I was talking to hers, she's from East 15. She started a business where essentially at the moment she is running a 2-week strength and conditioning training program for actors. And that is the free model. And then what she does is she looks to try and upgrade them to the premium model, which is then getting them to buy her services as a personal trainer specifically for actors. And she also started to design a series of courses online that people can access as well. So you've got to think about your pricing structure, your model for how you're going to start to generate revenue, and what that looks like and how it works for you. I'm not going to dwell on promotion too much because it's going to be covered today, I think, in various ways under the marketing and branding section. So it's just simply, how do you market what you do? So I'm going to skip on to people. And again, this is something I think we often underestimate, is who is involved in your business. Sometimes we think it's just us, but actually you've got to think beyond that. We spoke yesterday about maybe bringing in an accountant if it's relevant. But are you working with an accountant who maybe is a bit old school, doesn't believe in using, I don't know, say let's look at cloud accounting software, and tells you to keep doing things paper-based and then you risk losing things? Or do you have someone who's actually at the forefront of that space and saying, you know, yeah, okay, this technology has been really good, but there's a new one that's just come out. I recommend you kind of look at adapting that. Who is involved in your business? You know, once you take on your first employee, what kind of person do you want that to be? When you're offering customer service, what kind of experience do you want that to be? So when you're thinking about your business, what you do, what you sell, if that is a product or a service, sits right in the middle of this. Everything is a wraparound. So the way you deliver your customer service, the way you build a company culture, even if that culture is just for 2 people, you want to make sure that you both buy in to the same mentality, the same ethos, the same approach, the same belief in where you're going in the future. So when you're designing a business, when you're looking to say, well, it might just be me now, but I want it to grow, and in year 3, I want to take on 2 new staff. You've got to start thinking about the culture you want your staff to experience and how you want that to play into growing. And again, thinking about how you deliver what you do, how do you deliver it to others? So the process behind what you do is really key. And sometimes it helps to draw out what happens. So when a customer comes to you, their first experience of dealing with you, what does that look like for them? If they buy something from you, what does that look like? If they have a complaint, or if they need to return something, if you're running an online store as an example, you want to start mapping out the processes, and you don't have to be too complicated, but it's simply to kind of show you how your business works and really kind of understand it. Christian did a session in our recent workshop on visualization and how drawing can actually help you to understand how your business can grow. And he used the example of, well, if you want to go international, why don't you draw what that looks like? And I think that's a great way of looking at it in terms of problem solving. But before you get to the problem, if you're just starting out, think about your processes. If you're selling something and someone's not happy, how do you deal with refunds? How do you deal with complaints? What are your response times? You can literally, you don't have to be good at drawing. That's one thing Christian sort of said, is that as long as you do something differently, it can help you to visualize what your business will look like in reality. And with perception, again, this kind of ties into a continual review of what's happening. And it's almost a continual sort of review of market analysis. It's about seeing what's happening in the world around you. So when we're looking at the graphs, and I was talking about the political, economical things that can happen, how does that impact your business? What does that look like in terms of your case studies? If you're creating a business, how do they impact what people experience? What are their stories? So you need to have a product or service that is covered by all of these kind of these aspects, because then when you look at all of this, you get to the last point, which is the fundamental. What are the key features of your business? Is it design based? Do you have a heavy reliance on technology? What's the usability and usefulness? How long is that shelf life for? So if you create something now, will that problem still exist in 12 months' time? And if it doesn't, think about those kind of 7 Ps that we've just gone through, and these slides will be available afterwards. So think about how, if something may not be relevant in 12 months' time, you look at everything I've just sort of gone through, and how do you use those experiences to ensure that in 12 months' time, your business has evolved to the point where it's relevant for the next 12 months. And it all comes back to that relevance. Why will people continue to buy from me? Is it based on your values? And again, sometimes the easiest thing to do if you're not sure about what your values are is to go to Google, type in values. You'll probably find a website that lists 30 or 40. And what we did as a team exercise back in January was to actually go through all of the values, and we reduced a list of maybe 40 or 50 down to the 3 that are core to us as an Essex Startups team. And doing that means that we know that everything we do is based on those values that we as a team agree on. And you can do that yourself right now, but as you grow and you bring people in, you start to maybe sort of have a team around you as well. It's always good to rerun that as an exercise to see what other people's values are, or what they perceive the values of the business to be. So obviously you want something that is built on quality and has a strong brand presence as well. So you can see how some of these will be linked to things like finances. You can see how it's linked to marketing, branding, and communication. So really, it's just to kind of say, don't stand still with your business. Just because something works today doesn't mean it will work tomorrow. And if it doesn't, my question is, what are you going to do to make it work again? And it's easier to be prepared to change than it is to have to wake up and change on the spot. So just wanted to introduce the concept of how you design your business to be sustainable, viable and scalable. Those are words we use kind of in an application form for the startup visa process, but actually we think they're really relevant. So how are you going to be sustainable? What does that look like for you? And sustainable can mean two things. It can be long-term, but it can also be if there's an environmental impact. How are you going to be viable? When we spoke yesterday about cash flow, I spoke about how you can have a business that's profitable but doesn't have the cash flow to continue. So how are you going to do that? And is it scalable? For some of you, being a one-person business is what you want to do, and that's absolutely fine. But for others, it may be that you have to start with you, but you want that to grow over time. So how does your business look at a product and service that you offer and get you where you want to be? So think about kind of those things we've just spoken about and how all of that applies to your business. So what I'm going to do now, just very quickly, is I'm going to open it up for a Q&A. So to see if anyone's got any thoughts or any questions on how they might use that. I'm just looking to see. I'm going to set up some breakout rooms, and what we're going to do is Christian, Magda, Electra, and myself are going to go into one of those rooms each, and we're going to assign 3 or 4 of you to each room. And really, it's just a conversation for the next half hour to talk about what your business looks like and think about the products and services. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't really want myself, Magda, Christian, or Alexa to be talking too much for the next half hour. We might facilitate a little bit, but what I want you to do is to be comfortable in those rooms, to talk about your ideas, to ask questions about your own business and of other people's businesses, and really just to have a conversation, because that opportunity to talk to your peer group is a real benefit to actually growing your business. As much as you can book one-to-ones with the team, speaking to other people about it is exactly what our workshops are about and what we're looking to achieve and accomplish. So if anyone's got any questions, you can either pop them in the chat box now, but what I'm going to do whilst this is happening is I'm going to create the breakout rooms, and I'm just going to start assigning people. So you might notice you get an invite to go into these rooms. So is there any questions at the moment? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open.
So I can ask a question.
Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, this is. I don't know if it's a random question, but it just came to me. How much time or how much hours would you suggest if someone's just starting a business, or you're a student, you're trying to start your business, kick it off? How much time do you think someone should put in weekly? How many hours would you suggest, like, put in weekly hours to build your business? Stuff like, because sometimes we can be a bit laid back, or we just don't know how much actually the cost to actually making sure that it actually succeeds. So how much hours do you think is a good amount of time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm going to throw it back at you and say, how much do you think?
How much do you think? Maybe like 18 hours a week. I don't know, to be honest. 18 hours a week. I'm trying to do it, like, I've finished, so I'm trying to think, okay, I need to put more effort in because I've just been laid back. So I'm starting to probably think maybe an hour a day or something like that. That's just to be realistic for, yeah.
So I think you kind of answered it yourself, because you can't answer that question. It's really difficult for us to sort of sit here and say, well, if you work on it for 8 hours a day during the summer, 5 days a week, you're going to have a business at the end. That's not how it works, because if you don't use that time effectively, you're not going to be making any progress with what you're looking to do. So really, when it comes to starting a business, what we tend to do is we use what we call the 30, 60, 90-day plan. And it's about saying, okay, well, what are the priorities? What do you really need to do in the next 30 days to make the biggest amounts of progress that are the most important to your business? And as you do those, other things will undoubtedly come up.
Yeah.
Now, the two things are, first of all, if it's a business that you're truly passionate about and that you are committed to and dedicated to getting started, you will put in as much or as little time as you need to get it up and running. That may be 20 hours a day, it may be 2 hours a day. It really depends on how efficient you are and actually what the nature of your business is and what it will do. But the other is not to worry about whether or not you're spending the right amount of time on business, but make sure you're doing quality development aspects of the business. So if it's a case of saying, okay, well, if I'm going to spend half an hour doing just writing, social media posts, which will go out, over the next week, then that's really beneficial, and it's quite a small amount of time. But if you're going to say, okay, I'm going to spend 8 hours posting on social media and going into groups and just doing that, you'll suddenly find that you could spend a week on social media, you'll have made no progress, and there's been no real benefit to it. So it kind of comes down to setting key goals and objectives for your business from day one, which is actually before I even get my first customer, what do I need to do to be ready when my first customer comes to me? So there's no right or wrong answer. But it always does come back to how serious are you about making this work? How serious are you about making this a business that is going to support you? So that sustainability, how important is it to you that it's something that you have to make work and you have to make work? And that might be a case that it is, there's quite a common term now, which is side hustle. It might be that it's just something that you run evenings and weekends and you've got a full-time job. And you know what? That's absolutely fine. If it makes you happy, there is nothing wrong with that. But if you're the other mentality that says, well, you know what? The 9 till 5 isn't for me. I don't want someone telling me what to do. I don't want to have that kind of rigid format. I don't want that structure. Then actually, you're the kind of person who needs to create something for yourself. And again, it comes down to how serious are you about creating something for yourself that will sustain you. And actually, we will all admit that your business will change. So it might sort of start now, and in 12 months, it will look completely different, because you will also find things that work, things that don't work, things you enjoy. And it's all of those changes that you have to kind of bring into starting a business that kind of, as much as kind of maybe it's poorly represented in the graph, things don't move in a straight line. You know what? There are wiggles, there are bumps, there are kind of mountains to climb, sort of seas to swim, all of those things. But if you truly want to start a business, you'll find a way to overcome all of those. So I've just stopped sharing. And what I'm going to do now, if there aren't any other questions, is I'm going to open all of the breakout rooms. So hopefully you should all be assigned one. And what I will do is I'll join breakout room 4. So like I say, what we're going to do now is for about 20 minutes, just until past, we're going to have a conversation about your businesses, your ideas, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, okay? So what I'll do is I'll open all the rooms. So you should have hopefully now had a little button which comes up and sort of says join room. If you do that, then you can have a conversation and we'll take a break in 20 minutes.
Okay, so I think everyone's
back though. Can you please pop in your yes here, back, yo, whatever, into the chat box? That would be amazing. Oui.
Cool. Cool.
I think that's everyone, guys.
Cool.
Okay, so, right. So today we're going to look at the marketing and communications element, and it's going to be focused a lot around the elements that you'd include in your business plan. Magda and myself will be covering this, and we're going to start with marketing strategy and why we need one, the necessary areas to explore and research to help you compile one, and some of the key questions you should be asking along the way. So, why is a marketing strategy so important? Part of any great business plan is a sound marketing strategy. Marketing may seem like the last thing on your mind right now as you're beginning your business, or maybe you're just thinking about the ideas, but a great product or service is only as good as the customers you can reach, and this is where your marketing strategy will come in. So you've got this great product or service. Now you need to make sure the right people are hearing about it. Your marketing strategy is where you can map out who you are targeting and how you're going to tell them about your business. You want to create marketing materials or content that will grab your customers' attention, capture their interest, and hopefully encourage their need for your product or service and drive them into some sort of action. Your main aims for this part of the business plan are for people to find out who you are, what you do, and how they can find you. So every time you talk to someone about your business, you are in fact conducting marketing. The reason you're talking is to promote your product or service and to drive sales. So your marketing strategy will help you focus your approach, your techniques, and help you keep an eye on those all-important costs. And creating an effective marketing strategy will help you in various ways, including identifying who to talk to, how to talk to them, and exactly what it is you should be saying. So it's your main game plan, basically, for how to approach prospective consumers and convert them into customers and ultimately keep them coming back to you. But what even is marketing? I've got a short video on the next slide, just for you to have a quick look at, and we can find out. If you'd be so kind.
Take number 3.
There we go. Okay, so we've seen there a little bit about marketing, and this is a really useful way to start compiling your strategies, is to possibly keep the 4 Ps model in mind. So as we saw, there's product. You've got your product, whether that's a tangible good or an intangible service that fulfills a need or want of your customers. It's essential that you fully understand what you're providing and how it's unique in the marketplace in order to effectively translate that message to your customers. Then we've got price. From there, you can start to make your decisions on pricing based on the market, as this will impact profit margins, supply, demand, and marketing strategy, and ultimately how much you can spend on your marketing and promotional efforts. Promotion. So promoting your product comes next, and this will involve how you disseminate relevant product information to consumers and how your product is different from everything else that's out there. Promotion covers areas like advertising, public relations, social media, marketing, email marketing, etc. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a while. And then finally, place. You may have heard the saying, marketing is about putting the right product at the right price, at the right place, at the right time. So it's really up to you to identify the ideal locations to convert your potential consumers into customers. So if we pop on to the next slide, we'll have a look at some of the questions you should maybe be asking when compiling your marketing strategy. So who is my customer? You may already have a pretty good idea of who your customer is. They may even be the driving force behind you starting your business in the first place. Either way, your consumer research is essential in helping you at this stage, and we'll talk more about that in a little while. So the next question is, how can I reach them? You'll need to research what channels your consumers use to receive information. Maybe they're online only. Do they prefer physical interactions? Can you reach them en masse? Are there any related groups that you could infiltrate to talk about your business or at least gain some insightful feedback? So what should I say? Understanding how to speak to your specific consumer is critical. You need to be heard among the plethora of other voices all saying very similar things to you. So learn how they want to be spoken to, understand what grabs their attention, and research what will help them keep coming back. So how much will it cost? Identifying your main communication and promotional channels will help you to begin to identify your costs and gradually build up a picture of how much you could spend and how much you can spend. So remember, some marketing methods involve no cost at all. So think carefully about how to allocate your marketing budget. And then finally, who can help me? So think about the people who can be part of your team, even if they aren't employed by you. So build your supporters and advocates and get them to do some talking on your behalf. There's nothing quite like positive word of mouth. So can your friends help promote your product by wearing it or using it online? Can you offer some of your service for free for people to test in return for great feedback and reviews? Think about the people that you have around you at home, at work, and definitely here at the university. We are all here to help you. So remember, there are people on your side and they may just be waiting for you to ask them for help. So before you can do any of this and start answering these questions, you'll need to conduct your initial research into your business, which leads us on to Magda, as she talks through market research and competitor research.
Yay!
Magda.
Yeah, this is the fun part where normally when I talk face to face to people, everybody glazes over. So, but as we can see, to answer any of these questions that Alexa has just asked or asked on your behalf, is really to understand, take a step back actually first before we even dive into that, and understand your own market, understand your own industry, where you are, like which you are entering. So market research is really about gathering that information about your industry, your market trends, customer needs and behaviors, understand your competitor landscape, just everything around your industry. Because if you want to enter that industry, you need to be an expert within that industry or like at least to understand that industry and to really understand how it works, how the mechanics are going, how you can even sell products. What are the consumers actually want you to solve for them? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? So market research is really, really key. You can make it as complex and complicated as you want it to be, or as simple, but at least all about, it's completely up to you, but you need to understand the level of your market. But first and foremost, it's just about gaining clarity, really. Because obviously everything that, like, it influences everything in your business, whether that is your offering itself, your products and services, because you maybe realized you had an idea, but then you actually did some research and figured out that nobody wants it, or there is a different problem in that market that you actually should be focusing on. So you kind of pivot maybe your products and services slightly. So it highly influences your offerings. It highly influences how you want to launch your business or your service or your product. So really it influences everything. And it's just really fundamental. So that's why I always drone on about this. Next slide, please. Christian? Yeah. So the question is obviously, why do businesses fail? And well, some of the questions that maybe sometimes we ask ourselves, why do businesses fail? And we can actually see in the next slide. Come on, Christian, be on it. So you can see in this graph, and I mean, this has been communicated all over, that actually the main big reasons is that nobody wants your product, or there is no need for that products or services in your market. And again, it comes down to actually doing the research, because if you didn't know what the product, the market actually needs and the consumers in that market need, but you're still going ahead anyways, chances are you're not gonna sell anything because nobody needs that product. It sounds really harsh, but as you can see, 42% of businesses that fail, is the number one reason is because they haven't done their research. And actually, funnily enough, the second biggest one is cash flow. And obviously that we talked about yesterday. So those are the main big reasons. And you can look at any kind of statistics. I looked at, there was, I think back in like a few years ago, there was a Forbes statistics that came out, and it basically said the same thing. Market cash flow and market need are the two main reasons, or managers not knowing their financials, not knowing how to interpret it and move along with their financials. So those are like the main reasons why businesses fail. Not putting any threat on you, but just emphasizing that the importance of market research and the importance, obviously, of your business financials. Next. So on market research, we have two types of market research. We have obviously the primary research and the secondary research. And I'm sure most of you have kind of heard about these things maybe in your university work. And the same holds true for when you do market research. I always recommend starting with secondary research because it's the most cost effective and easiest to gain access to. Because you can just in general get some really good insights when you do online research on, you know, articles, blog articles, watching YouTube videos, reading magazines online, reading different things, so you can really get an insight into your industry and understand the market trends, and also understand your audience and your competitors. And then if you want to, or if you need, it depends really on your product and your business. Some businesses do need to do focus groups and things, so then you move into your primary research, which costs a little bit more because you have to conduct focus groups and interviews and surveys and that kind of thing. But obviously they are then very much customized to your business need. So that's definitely another area to look into when you, like, maybe when you already have a little bit more further knowledge about the market already, and you know exactly who you want to ask certain things about your products and services. And then the next things. The next big part of your market research is your competitors. And I can't stress this enough. You need to understand, don't be afraid of your competitors. They kind of validate your business idea probably for you already, because if you have competitors in the market, then there is definitely a need in that market. But there are two types of competitors. There's the direct and the indirect. The direct competitors are the competitors who basically offer exactly the same as you, maybe in a different territory, like a different country, but or maybe even in the same country as you. They offer exactly the same thing. And then the indirect competitors are more competitors. Actually, they are the ones that might have the same products and services that are local, but in their territory, or they have very similar products and services, or could easily enter your market because already, they have a similar base product, but then could move into your market. So those are like your two types of competitors. And it's really understanding, again, your competitive landscape around you in your industry. Who are the big players? Who are, or even also the smaller players? Like, who is there to, who's offering similar services, similar products, or maybe even exactly the same? And is the market big enough for, depending on how many competitors are there? So it's really good to look into them. But then also what you can actually do is look into them and learn from them, because you're in this that position that you want to enter that market, and you have actually now the opportunity to learn what they put out there and how can you do it better, how can you do it differently, how can you improve on what they are doing. So it gives you a lot of insight on on how you can actually shape your business and your products and services to maybe even get into a niche maybe a little bit more, or whatever it is, but it helps to compare your competitors. We usually recommend to do it on a grid where you can kind of compare different, these are just examples on the left hand side. You can compare them on your products and services. You can compare them on location, countries, prices, what is their unique selling point. You can compare them on website design, what kind of social media channels are they having, what are they putting out there, is it the tone of voice, branding, whatever you want to compare them on. But it's really good to do compare them. So we always suggest to do a grid because it helps you to really learn, and also at the bottom maybe analyze like what from each competitor, what can you learn, what do you like what they are doing, and maybe that's something that would inform your strategy of how you communicate, or maybe something that you didn't like how they do certain things, and learn from that and how would you do it differently. So it's really a nice way to also find your unique selling point, so your competitive advantage over those competitors. So yeah, I love competitor research. I know I'm geeking out on these stuff, but not everybody has to have this passion about it. But it's still super, super valuable and should be done with any business. And also, like, sometimes we do it at the very beginning, and then like 3-4 years down the line, we don't actually know what our competitive landscapes looks like anymore. So it's always valuable to have another look at that later down the line as well. Next slide, please. So another good thing that we like looking at is the product positioning map, because you can use this positioning map, or positioning grid we call it sometimes, to put your competitor on this map. So you can put yourself somewhere. You can on the Y and the X axis, you can put maybe price and quality, for example, as two variables, and then really see how you would position some of your competitors and where would you position yourself. And this really is a visual representation of the brands that are, or the businesses that are in your market, and obviously compared to you. And it also is also often used in terms of brand perception by consumers. So it's not just about your business per se. I mean, you can use it also with your competitors as to just, understand your own market a little bit more, but it's also often used in terms of what are actually consumers perceiving, because we can put our brand out there and think, oh yeah, it communicates this, this, and this. And then actually when we ask consumers, they didn't get any of that, or they have a completely different set of perceptions. So it's sometimes really good to create a product positioning map from the consumer's point of view. So in marketing, that's often used for that. But yeah, like I said, on variable 1 and 2 could be anything. I mean, mostly they use it for price and quality, but it can also use for different variables. Here's one that was done, I think it's a couple of years ago, or maybe even more than a few years ago, for car brands. So as you can see, obviously, high quality, high prices, Mercedes-Benz and Porsche. Not sure whether I agree with all of these, but that's a perception map of general customer perceptions, I think. But it's just good to see, where do people fit in? If you were now a brand, a car brand, where would you want to put yourself in comparisons to these? And I think we have another one. Yeah, and this one isn't about price and quality. This is about something that's organic and innovative versus classic and non-organic. So this is ice creams, as you can see, and it's just again, it's just a different kind of positioning grid that helps looking at your competitors or looking at different brands, and then where would you position yourself in that if you were an ice cream brand? Yeah, and I think in general these are really nice tools to use. And we will have in our first exercise, after Alexa continues quickly on customer research, we will look at positioning grid in a second. Over to Alexa.
Rookie error, unmute first before you start talking. Okay, so thank you, Magda. Another fundamental part of your market research is that of your potential customer. So understanding their needs and behaviors at this stage will help you identify how best to reach them and how to talk them through your marketing, but ultimately how to refine your offer where necessary to meet their needs and raise opportunities for your business to grow. So these people are going to be buying your products or using your service. It really pays to make sure you know as much as you can about them to ensure you can find them and offer them something that drives them into action. Like Magda said, sometimes there's no market need, so doing this customer research at the start is really beneficial. So how can we find out more about them? Slide number 2, please. There are various different exercises that can be conducted to gather the information you need on your customer. They can range from primary research techniques such as online surveying of your existing customer base or surveying potential customers via third-party consumer panels. There's mail surveys, although potentially costly and possibly slightly out of favor in this digital age. But your target market may not have immediate access to the internet, so it's still an area for consideration depending on your product and your consumers. Telephone interviews, a great way to get quick and direct feedback. Might again be seen as a bit old-fashioned when we have emails, but particularly in a time like this that we find ourselves in now, everyone will be emailing. So how can you stand out? Be the person that calls them. Plus an email can quickly and harmlessly be deleted. A phone usually gets answered. Face-to-face interviews, even though these may be in a different format right now, a face-to-face discussion with existing and potential customers can raise amazing insights into your market and your customer needs. And there are various other techniques that fall under primary. You can also conduct some secondary research. And this usually comprises of data that is collected and organized by a third party on your behalf, measuring consumer attitudes, product and brand preferences, media consumption habits, and other demographic and lifestyle characteristics. So some examples of secondary customer research include trends by retail-specific market research companies, media consumption reports by data aggregators, and shopping behavior tracking by retail specialists, things like that. The cost of secondary research can be relatively low, as the information gathered will be accessed by multiple businesses, so they're like balancing that out between everybody. And however, this research is much more generalized and may not focus on your specific target market, and it just can't provide the same level of insight as your primary research, but still definitely worth a consideration. So if we move on to slide number 3, there are a few techniques that we will often utilize as a team, and they include things like the empathy map canvas, which goes into quite a bit of detail about your customer. We will also use the most valuable customer map that clearly and easily defines your customer by demographic and psychographic data only. And then finally, the customer avatar, which we're going to have a brief look at now. So the customer avatar aims to map out exactly what your customer is thinking, feeling, and needing. So now I'm just going to go quickly through the sections. So the next slide, please. So the first bit, you want to get their demographics in. So that's name, age, gender, marital status, children, where they might be based. Any of these characteristics could be a key to your marketing and how you target your customer. Again, just fill in the additional details about them, like what do you think their quote for life would be? What might their occupation be, or their job title? Maybe they don't have a job at all. Do they have an annual income? Do they have money that they can access but they're not actually making it? What level of education are there? All these little areas will help you build up a complete picture of who your customer is, and that is what will help you in how to talk to them. So the next stages you've got are their goals and values. Obviously, their goals is what they're trying to achieve. It's what they want out of the business. So here you'd write down what it is your customer wants. Maybe they want, well, we'll look at an example later, sorry. The next part is values. So what are they committed to? So these can be core values, fundamental values, things that they live their lives by, basically. And then the next thing you're going to look at is their challenges. So what is frustrating them? What is standing in their way to achieving their goals? That's where you can come in. And then their pain points. Again, it is what's frustrating them, but this is what they're really, really worried about. So they might be worried that if they can't meet their goals, that this negative thing is going to happen. So you need to have in your head what it is they want, what they're committed to do it, but also the barriers that might be in the way. So when we look at the next slide, this the sources of information section is really interesting, because this is where you can start to identify communication channels possibly. So for your customer, you're looking at what type of books do they read? What magazines do they go to? Do they read blogs, or have they favorited a website that they go back to for information over and over again? Depending on your customer, maybe they attend conferences or expos about this particular subject or product or service. And again, they might have gurus, they might have influencers they love. If you're selling cleaning products, maybe they love Mrs. Hinch. So learning about how they speak to their customers will just add to how you can speak to your customers. And then finally, you've got the objections and roles part. So the possible objections. So these are the sorts of barriers that are in their way to achieving what they want. And for you to identify these barriers is exactly what everyone wants to identify. Like, how can you fix something that these people are worried about? That's where your business comes in. So identifying this, what the barriers may be, is where you come in and break them down for them. And then the role in the purchase process. So again, understanding your customer, like we said before, maybe they don't make the money, but they spend the money. Maybe they make the money, but they don't spend the money. So for example, they might be the overall budget holder, but they have to refer to a team of people to make the decision, or they might be the sole decision maker. Filling in all of these elements of your customer avatar, again, it will just give you this big overview, exactly who you're talking to, which then narrows down how you talk to them, where you talk to them, and for how long. So what we're going to do now is do a short activity. We're going to go back to the positioning grid that Magda spoke about primarily.
Yeah. So we're going to split you in groups. So just to add actually to your last point, sorry, one quick add was with the decision-making role. So for example, Holly and Charlie Ann, sorry, I'm picking on you, but like in your case, because you're going to schools, you're, you know, like we discussed already previously, it's not the students who are even though your product or your service is catered to the students or the pupils, it won't, you know, the decision makers are not the students. So the decision makers are the principals, the board, whoever, the council, whatever it is. But so you kind of have to think about, okay, how do I reach them? So they are your actual customers, but then obviously your services and your products are more targeted towards the students. So that's just something to think about in your own businesses. Cool. Exercise 1. Well, we're going to put you in groups. Christian, I just sent you the breakout rooms. So I forgot, sorry, Brandon, I didn't actually, you're in group 1. So Christian, if you can add Brandon to group 1. So we have Jordan, Nidal, Temi, Charlie Ann, Brandon, Elena, Camilla, and Venicia. I hope I pronounced it correctly. You're all in group 1. And then Etche, I hope I pronounced that as well. Holly, Diana, Mohammed, Agnieszka, and Surya and Alicia, you're all in group 2. What we want you to do is look at the 2. So case study, so group 1 has case study Jimmy's Jam, which is in the email. So the email I sent out earlier this morning, earlier this morning, yeah. You should download group 1, you should download Jimmy's Jam and the positioning grid. And then group 2, you should download Freya's Family Photographer and download also the positioning grid. The customers on either one, leave it for now. That's for exercise number 2. What we want you to do in those breakout rooms, so we're going to go into them with you, and we want you to do a little bit. So we have half an hour in those rooms, and we want to kind of look at the maybe the first 10 minutes. Each of you in your respective group kind of just looks at you know, who reads the case study, kind of does a little bit of market research or like competitor research in this case, find some competitors in that same market space, and then in the group, in the breakout group, come together and present kind of, or work together on creating that positioning grid. We want you to create for each of the case studies one positioning grid where you put the case study itself, so that business, and then kind of, you know, collate a little bit of competitors around it and see where they would be on that positioning grid. So it's just a little exercise. It's not hard. You know, it doesn't have to be, there's no right or wrong in this. So, but yeah, I think it's a nice exercise to kind of understand competitor research. Cool. So now we are going to chat about branding. Let me just rearrange my screen.
See the PowerPoint, or do you see the presenter view?
The correct one, whichever the correct one is. Cool. So we're going to talk about branding. Some of you might have seen this section already when we did a weekend a few months ago, but I think it's always good to reiterate, because maybe at the time you weren't ready to actually action any of this, or it's just nice to have a little refresher. Branding. So when we think of branding or brands, there are a lot of things that, you know, come to mind always, but one of the main things that always, as a first step, usually when we ask people, like, so what is your brand, is, oh, I've got a logo, and that's it. So, but that's obviously not it. Branding, if you studied marketing or any of that, then you know this already, but if you haven't, then this is just a little bit of branding is everything that you communicate outside of your business. And it kind of builds on each other. So it's, yes, it is your logo and your design and your colors and all these kind of things, but it also is your business values. It's the strategy that you put behind to reach your customers. It is, like I said, the logo. It's but it's also your marketing, like what are you actually promoting, your advertising, what are you saying, what are you putting out there. It's your entire business identity, if that makes, and it builds the trust. If people are engaging with your brand and they understand your values and they really like supporting your values, then that is a lot of trust building. Next. So I love this pyramid. It's one of my favorite ones to always show. If you click, I think one more, then there's a, yeah, there's the little arrow. So it really is like building blocks. Building your brand strategy, for me, is kind of, I always look at it as a pyramid, because it is everything like we just discussed. It's your values, but it's also understanding your customers and who is your target audience or your ideal audience. It's your value proposition. So how are you solving those pain points for your audience? Or maybe you, like, what kind of gain points are they getting from you? How are you driving value for your customers? Then it looks at your competitor advantage. So what is your USP, your unique selling point over all of your competitors, as we kind of looked at competition and competitor research earlier. But it also then obviously translates into what's your products and services and how would you communicate that, and that builds then into your message, your identity. And at the very top is actually only your logo. So all of these things kind of build the building blocks on top of each other, but all of this is then translated into your logo. So a lot of people start the other way around. They start with a logo just because, yeah, that looks nice, or they like that color, they're drawn to that. And that's sometimes fine when you don't have anything else yet. But once you kind of build those building blocks, you need to rethink your design and your color choices and your, you know, icons or logo in general, because I bet it will change. And also it will change over time. I mean, rebranding is a thing that a lot of companies do once in a while because it keeps things fresh. Yes, please, next slide. Sorry. So then we kind of want to look at brand and the message. So we kind of looked at all these other building blocks before. So now we're just going to quickly look at brand message and brand story. And actually there is a nice quote, if you go to the next slide, that is Seth Godin is kind of obviously the person for marketing. he's written a lot of marketing books, and you know, his words are often a little bit used as gospel kind of thing in the marketing world, so whether you agree or not. But I like this quote from him because it says, no one buys the features, they buy the story. And it's really true, because storytelling is so important when you're building your messages you're putting out there, when you're building that brand identity and that brand message that you want to tell. It's the story of your brand, essentially. If you are a very personalized service, like in one of the case studies we have the photographer, that's a very personalized service. So that is almost like the photographer is the brand. So it's what is the story that you need to tell. But also in when you have businesses that are not personal, you still want to, you know, those core values, for example, that you kind of put together, or that you want to stand for, and that you really, that can build a story as well. So it's kind of looking at it from that perspective. It drives also, you know, the advertising images that you're going to use, the copy that you're going to use in those posts and promotional materials. And yeah, it's the story is the heart of your brand and your service and the people in your business, or even your customers. And also another thing is the best brand stories, or the most remarkable ones, don't actually focus on the features a company does, so what the company does, or the products it sells. It's actually the most effective brands tell the story around the why they do what they do. And obviously our favorite person to always quote on this, and it is really is Simon Sinek. So if you haven't come across Simon Sinek before, definitely look up his TED Talk on Start With Why. He also written a book. We can highly recommend that. I've read it myself, and it's the TED Talk is a little bit older now. It looks like it's from the 90s, but it's actually early 2000s. But it looks very old, but it's still true. It's still to this day. It's so true. You have to start with your why. Like, what is the driver? Why you do what you do, and why do you get up in the morning to do this business? And that's kind of, so you're not selling the features. You're selling that story of why. And there are a few very successful brands out there who have communicated that way, and it had changed and pivot their business model completely. So it is really important to think about your brand story and the messages that you put out there. Next. Cool. Next, we're going to look at brand identity and design. Obviously, we all know, yes, the logo is important, but actually in that whole design aspects, there are so many different elements. So yes, you have your icons potentially, you have color, you have language, you have maybe the layout, how your website is structured, how you're using color and color blocks, maybe any patterns that you're using, maybe imagery. So very important, what kind of images are you using? What kind of font and typeface are you using? And again, the icons. So it's all of these things that kind of build your visual identity of your brand. And it is just that visual, it's the visual translation. Your logo and your design around it is the visual translation of all of these building blocks that you stand for. Yeah, so for tone of voice, for example, we have the, you know, that depends on who's your target audience and how do you want to communicate or speak with them. So if you have a very, very business-like persona as your customer, then you might not be as casual and, you know, use slang in your words, but you want to be professional to them. But if you have maybe children, or if you have teenagers, or, you know, other people that you want to be a tone of voice that's a little bit more casual, then you use different words. So just think about language, I think, in that sense. And then when you look at fonts, it's very important to look at what do these means. There's obviously the sans serif and the serif fonts, which are a little bit, they have these little, what's it called? Like Times News Roman is one of the biggest serif fonts, which is really old school, but it has these little, like little tiny endings, or whatever you want to call them, on it. Whereas the sans serif fonts are very more the block font. So you can see on that little wheel, that is actually sans serif, so they don't have these little wiggy endings, I guess, on each of the letter. And then you have the script fonts, which are very much like hand-drawn, or, you know, very, very sort of scripty. And again, they have all different meanings. So you kind of need to look and make a decision about the typeface as well. And the same with the color, and we will come to that in a little while, just further on, where the colors have different meanings and emotional responses you can trigger by using a certain color in your, you can trigger that in your customers. Next. So the tone of voice, as I already said, you can be casual, you can be emotional, you need to decide who you're talking to and what you stand for, who you're talking to, and then you can use different types of words, the language that you're using. You can be humorous, you can be passionate, you know, but you can also be serious and formal. You can be very detached, you know, but you can also be very warm and calm and punchy, whatever your really the true sense is. But I hope you understand. So when you understand your customer, like we said, when you do your customer research, everything again translates from that. So you need to understand who you're talking to, and then how do you want to talk to them? What do you stand for? And how do you want to communicate that? And I think that drives your language and or the tone of voice. And that again drives your language, what kind of verbs and vocabulary you're using. And also whether, you know, slang versus no slang, or colloquial English versus very dictionary-like English. That's kind of up to you. And then the next is the colors. So colors can range from everywhere on the rainbow. But if you go a little bit more into the psychology of color, so this is obviously probably on your screen very hard to read, so I'm going to pick out a few. So 84.7% of consumers cite color as the primary reason why they buy a product. And when people buy, 93% look at visual appearance. So you can see how important color would be in that visual appearance. 6% only look at texture, and 1% decides on sound and smell. Research reveals that people make a subconscious judgment about an environment or product within 90 seconds of initial viewing. This might have been going down by now because we are so like with our fast-paced scrolling and all these kind of things. It might be even less than that. Between 62% and 90% of that assessment is on color alone. 80% think color increased brand recognition. 52% of shoppers did not return to a store due to overall aesthetics. Ads in color are read up to 42% more than the same ad in black and white. And yeah, in general, color can improve the comprehension of your brand or your product, the learning and the reading. So it's really, really important. And this is just, might be a little bit outdated, but I think overall it just shows you how important color is. And then, yes, there is the psychology guide also behind. So each color, this is obviously high level color. So your nuances and your kind of range within that, but you can see in this little graph here, how the emotional response. So if you're using a lot of red, so that can be ambitious, but it could also be show energy and confidence, bold. Sometimes they think it's also danger though. But it could also be very youthful. And you can see obviously Coca-Cola, you have some brands down there as reference. If you're using black, for example, you have strength, power, professionalism, you know, it's quite, if you use like black and white in the contrast sense, you get quite a good amount. The same with gray, it's very timeless, practical. So Apple, for example, they use gray. Yellow is a lot about optimism, fun, you know, and then, like I said, there are loads and loads of different aspects to it. And it's kind of, again, thinking about what do you want to communicate? So do you want to be, you know, a color or a logo or a brand that is very ambitious or very, you know, youthful and bold? Or do you rather want to be, it depends on, again, on your product, it depends on your values, but it also depends on your customers. Do they respond to a bold, dangerous red? You know, they might think, oh, I don't want to get in touch with that. It depends on how you're using that color as well, what nuances you're using, and in which like degree. If you have, for example, 3-4 brand colors that are the main colors and they all kind of fit nicely together, then maybe one of them, which could be a red, is not used as often, or is not your primary brand color. It really depends on how you want to go about it, but it's just kind of think about that everything triggers an emotional response in your customers, and that kind of drives that part of it. Cool. I think we're already there where we want to do another exercise. Right on time, I'm hoping. So we want to, we go back into our groups, and now we kind of want to look at the customer avatar that we send around for each of your for your case studies. So given your customers and your market position in exercise 1, obviously I don't know how it worked in your group, Alexa, but in our group we didn't actually do a lot of research because there wasn't enough time, but we kind of looked at how we would be conducting research if we were to do it on our own businesses. But we kind of looked at the overall where we kind of think the photography business would be in the market. But in general, I think even if you don't know your competitors at this point, it's still good to know, okay, so you're a little bit higher end maybe with your prices or wherever you are on that grid. Think about we kind of want you to think about your case studies branding. So is it like, what kind of tone of voice would you be using? What kind of fonts, what colors, icons, maybe specific words, images, that kind of thing.